Hello everyone, Maurice here, and today I'm bringing you a meta report for Axie Infinity Origin Season 6, the Epic era, the early Epic era. Well, as I said, it's early. That just means the meta is really not very settled, and I would call it really just the meta is all over the place at this point. People are trying different things, and they're just maybe even close to 20 archetypes at the top, you know, 200 or something. So Okay, I'm just trying to summarize, what are people trying, and just to look at the data. Okay, so let's just jump into the statistics first. So first of all, it's the player-based statistics, and you can see now there are actually over 50,000 players who've been playing, but of course, quite a lot of them are maybe just play a few games, and if you are really looking at like people at Tiger, right, those I would say is the people who actually play enough to get to Tiger, then there's actually about just over 10,000 people in Tiger, and then another nearly 6,000 players in Dragon, and then actually more than 2,000 players already at Challenger. So and that is kind of like the active player base, and then of course the rest are really like players who are just beginning and just starting and may not be as familiar with the game to get to Tiger yet. Okay, so in terms of the challenger, you can see it's always very steep. It's actually always a very nice curve like this, where there are only I think 3 players that are above 2200s, and then actually even only like 250 players above 2000 victory stars, and then the rest will be the lower challenger. Okay, so let's just look at the archetype usage, and this is the one where it's really very colorful, and you just see all sorts of things. Do note that there are players who, like just try different things out, and even the top players, because now it's a very early meta, right? A lot of top players are not pushing yet, and so they are really just playing different things, and so it's not really very representative in that sense. Like at the very top, because let's say we're at the very top, there are only 3 players. At the moment, but of course there has been players who were at that rank and then dropped down as well. So these will also be included just because this is tracking actually the matches being played when the player is at a particular victory star point. So I would say the gist of it is that actually it's better to look at the write up, right? Just because I have more like actual info here, right? Where the top 3 players actually are running Fury Aggro, Leafy, and Confused, right? So those are the 3 players, and they I think exclusively played these 3 archetypes as well. So they're just sticking with that particular team that they are playing, because at this point you're really just like trying your particular team out and see how it goes. And of course, this will change over time. We have, say, for example, now there are only 3 players at 2200, but I'm pretty sure a few days down the road there'll be more players, and then things might also shift. So here I can only conclude some general trend. I would say that one of the general trend is that Poison is really not doing too well, I must say. AoE is actually also not the best, but it's still up there. But I think Poison is the main one, and also Anemone is the other one that gets squeezed out. So those are the 2 that were pretty good in the rare era, but it's really not performing in the epic era. But we do see quite a lot of new, existing archetypes, also new archetypes, and I'll actually highlight a few later on. So I'll just probably jump right into those. Okay, so in terms of win rate, um, Leafy, Fury Aggro are the only 2 that are really on the very top, and that's because I do only include matches, or rather data with over 10 matches. And so if there are fewer than 10 matches, I excluded them just because there is really too few to say. And of course, people at the top are definitely have like high win rate. So it's better to look at actually the 2100 and even like 2000 kind of level and see what's kind of is this good for climbing. And I see that Feather Fan is actually a pretty good one. Of course, Fury Aggro still very good. Leafy is actually not bad as well, and Confused, okay, and also Perch. So those are the few that I would say are pretty good at climbing. Sustain, interestingly, is also up there. So if you are looking for climb at that kind of level, then those are the archetypes you should consider. Whereas you can see Poison, Actually, Glorious Main, maybe getting up there not too well, but Poison is really the one that's really going down. Spikes as well, actually, but you don't really see Spikes anymore. It's really just going further and further down. So I would probably expect that yeah, we probably will exclude Spike in the next meta report, depending on, of course, how many players play. And this is actually ranked by the number of players like overall above 1700. And so, of course, a lot of players at like the further down are playing Poison, and that's why it's still at the top. So if I scroll back up here, you can see that actually a majority of players in High Dragon are actually playing Poison, and unfortunately for them, it's very hard to push up just because Poison is not as great in the Epic era, it seems like. Okay, so here are the kind of archetype matchups, and I'm just going to scroll through them. Of course, check out the blog post if you're interested. For actually the different V-star victory point, I have those at the bottom of the blog post as well, but I'm not going to show this here just because there's a lot of data, and you can see it's very dense as well. There's a lot of different archetypes at this point. But I do want to highlight a few archetypes that could be fun to play and could be pretty successful. And one is Fury Aggro, and this is the team that is at the moment the best. Well, rather, when I say the best, is like the top player, the number one player playing this team. And yeah, it's really just, you can see like triple beast just get into Fury and then just hit very hard. That's basically the basic game plan here. A lot of the Mask of Frenzy, of course, on like confident and just like double Shiva in general, just being able to actually get to Fury, and actually Zen as well here, getting the Rage as well. So a lot of ways to get Rage stacks to get to Fury, and then of course you have Imp, you have Ronan, even a tiny Dino here to really deal a lot of damage. So that's really the game plan. Of course, like it's not as easy as it seems. It's because the tricky part, of course, is to line up your timing of getting into Fury and the resources, the attacks card available in your hand. Right? Of course, you don't want to get into Fury without any attack cards on that Axie. So this is basically the challenge. So even though the game plan is pretty simple, but then the execution could be quite challenging. Okay, so then yeah, let's go into some like so-called newer archetypes. All right, this is actually one that you haven't really seen much before, and this is, I call it Feather Fan, and because it runs triple Feather Fan here, yeah, which basically scales off with the amount of feather, and that's why you see double feather spears, and then you have double tri-feather as well, just so that you can get a lot of feathers, especially with the charms and runes as well. Yeah, mostly the charms as well. So it's interesting that usually this kind of archetype actually runs a reptile with a spiky spear, and then you have this scaly spear that gains spikes, and then you have the tri spikes as well that scales off the spikes with the prehistoric armor. So this will be another finisher as well, right? Because the tri spikes can do a lot of damage. But basically, it's really just about scaling up your feather bonus damage, and get the feather fans off to deal massive damage. And Sacred Feather is actually a pretty good tech here, right? Because there's a lot of feather synergy. So this will often heal you for, well, gain another 100 plus or maybe even 200 HP, depending on, of course, how many feather stacks you have on the front. So okay, so this is like a new archetype, and then let's just see some, I won't say too new, but still archetypes that hasn't been too successful in the past, but has been played, but now has been more successful. So one of them is Purge, and Purge is really the one that I think can be pretty fun to play, especially if you enjoy like OTK, like one turn kill kind of teams. So in other card games in general, a lot of the card games will have this kind of OTK combo, and in Axie Origins, then Purge will probably be one of the closest one you can get into a OTK, and it is an OTK deck or team where in this case you can actually get to a round 3, 6 or even 7 energy Purge with an OTK, which is pretty crazy. So the idea, of course, is getting 2 or even 3 of your Axies into Fury. Right, so Furious Fox, of course, will help you get a few stacks, but of course, it's all about the Mask of Frenzies on all of your zero cost beast cards, right? So that you just basically get so many rage stacks all across the board, and yeah, and really just like fire off a 6 or sometimes even 7 energy purge, right? Imagine because you already have 3 energy at the beginning, especially with the energy shot, you can get to 8 shots pretty easily, right? In round 3, with the Cointel, that gives you an extra energy, and of course, for each Axie you get into Fury, you get an extra energy. So if imagine all 3 of your Axies getting into Fury, and then you have the Cointel, and that will be 7 energy purge in round 3. And that could deal basically 500 plus damage across the board. Even with 6 energy purge, you can do like 448 damage, which is already more than enough for a lot of, especially aggro kind of team, which don't really have that much um, shield in general. So yeah, that much HP in general. So this is a pretty fun team, I must say. Of course, it still has certain weaknesses. Right? Depending on the build, actually, this is like one particular build, and there are at the moment many different types of or many different builds of purchase because people are still experimenting and trying out what's the optimal build, and I'm pretty sure people will continue to optimize it. And this is definitely one to look out for just because it has a lot of potential. In terms of weaknesses, I would say aggro might still be able to aggro, like say one of these down, and then once your taunt actually go down, maybe that opponent can dispel your rage stack on the mid or something, then that could be one way to tackle this. The other could be AoE dispel with the Black Sage as well, slowing down the rage stack. That will be for AoE or even Leafy with Buzz Buzz, that kind. Could also slow this purge down, but still, it is going a pretty fast team, I must say, right? Potentially round 3, and there's OTK. I guess the other weakness is that this team, this kind of purge team, really depends on card draw, but also depends on the turn order. Ideally, you want to go you want to go second so that you have more cards, and then you can get the round 3 OTK, whereas if you go first, then you might have to go or wait until round 4, and the opponent might have more time to pick up some KOs. So those are a few weaknesses, but I do feel like it's definitely one to look out for, I feel. And when more people getting more optimized axes for Purge, yeah, I feel like this might be the meta where, or the team, or the archetype where people might have to tech against it just because it could be just so powerful. Okay, the next one of Topaz. I mean, if you've played Axie Origins for a while, you already know how it works. But for those that are new to it, then basically it is all about getting a lot of banish cards. Because Topaz damage scales with amount of banished cards in your banished pile. So the idea is, of course, get all your Nemo tails out and then use your Innocent Lamb to also turn into Nemo tail, and that actually helps you ramp up, especially with Energy Shot, and now, of course, with the change in the energy burst mechanic, it makes it relatively easy to get to 4 energy. And then yeah, you just use Babylonia to apply the vulnerable, and then just use Topaz for massive damage. Of course, I would say the other advantage of banishing a lot of cards is thinning out your deck, so you draw into the Topaz very quickly. So this is the typical Topaz team, and the main change for this season is really about the energy shot and the energy change mechanic that allows Topaz to get to 4 energy faster, then they can compete with the other archetype better. Okay, and then we have another fun team, which is sort of like an OTK as well, close to an OTK, and that is Cuckoo Boba. So Cuckoo Boba is actually an archetype that has seen play at the beginning of this season, meaning like rare era as well. It wasn't too successful. We did see play at quite close to the top, but now we do also see some teams getting maybe top 50, close to top 50 with a Cuckoo Boba team. And how it works, again, it's very simple really. It's getting your Cuckoo stacks all on your Booba, right? So you can see it's Innocent Lamb, Cocoon, really just so that you stack it up. And the reason why you want to stack up the Cocoon stacks is that, if you don't know what Cocoon does, is that it actually gives the Axie next single attack plus 75 damage, right? If you stack up 2, it'll be plus 150. If you stack up 4, it'll be plus 300 damage, right? And of course, what you're trying to scale is one of the, well, I guess the Booba's attack called Booba Brush, which has been changed now. And now meaning this season, where now what it does is that it does 85% splash damage in Fury mode, right? So effectively, you can do imagine your Bubble Brush have 300 extra damage from the Cuckoo, right? Then it will do maybe like 400 damage to the um, main target, and then it'll do another 300 plus damage, splash damage to the other two Axie. So this is effectively how this works. Of course, you have the other things for support in terms of Fury or Rage. Right? So you have the Confident, you have basically all the Mask of Frenzies on the zero cost beast cards in order to get the Bubba into the Fury mode. Okay, so this is another fun, close to OTK kind of team. And I would say finally we have Sponge, and Sponge is again not a new archetype, but we've seen Sponge played actually last season in the Epic era as well. Of course, typically for Sponge it's usually in the Mystic era, but in the Epic era, it can find success as well, especially now that it's easier to get to energy bursts because now you only need 12 fragments. So the game plan really is, of course, use the Nemo ear and Nemo tail, get to energy burst so you can get the energy advantage early compared to your opponent, and then just stack up bubbles, of course, when you play your Nemos. And then change or convert those bubbles into bubble bombs, and then just attack and do AoE damage with the bubble bombs. So that's the typical game plan here. So those are really the archetypes that I think could be fun to try out. That's because, of course, you can still play Leafy, AoE, or all those that are still successful and can still be quite viable. But I think if you want to try something new, Sponge probably is not that new, but I think Cuckoo Boba, Purge, if you haven't played that yet, even though Purge again is not new, right? It's something that has been played before, but now it just feels like it can be pretty viable. And Feather Fan as well. Of course, the limitation of Axie origins in general is really getting the Axie, and that's why I think Axie is it's a pretty interesting game. Right? One of the unique feature of Axie origins is that actually the meta can be influenced by the availability of Axies, because in other, let's say, traditional Web 2 games, people can get the cards that they want, right? Whereas for Axie, because, well, first of all, it requires time for breeding. The other is that actually the era actually is pretty short, right? It's only 2 weeks. So the meta, I feel like, doesn't really get fully developed, and then we already move on to the next era. And this is where I guess is in a way fun. But of course, it could also be expensive or maybe even frustrating for players who might have to always chase the meta if you want to be successful. But of course, for a lot of casual players, they just want to play their favorite archetype. Then you'll just have to depend on how good the teams that you have in terms of against the rest of the meta. So another thing that I do want to talk about is that it'll be interesting to see how vertical progression, like parts upgrade, further change the dynamic of this meta evolution, like for each era. That's because now the meta could be limited by the availability of Axies, like just from breeding in general. But once you have vertical progression, then it further limits the availability of Axies with certain combination of cards, and that will even, I would say, slow down in a way, slow down the evolution of the meta, or maybe it will just shift the dynamics, meaning people might try different things, and nobody might be able to get an optimal Axie, for any era. Who knows? Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it in terms of this meta report. So if you wanted to check out the blog post, because there are additional data up here, especially if you're interested to see what time of the day people play certain archetype or something. Of course, for the lower down rank, then it's pretty even. Of course, like once you have a lot of players, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're really at the top and well, top 50 or even top 100 or something, then maybe these are the data that you might want to check out. Okay, so that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next report.